Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so let's start off with the first source. Everybody should be able to see. I shared the source sheet, so everybody should be able to see. Because the bread of our forefathers did not have time, the dough did not have time to rise before God appeared to our forefathers. As it says, because they were driven out of Egypt, they could not wait. And they had not prepared food for themselves. First of all, we're going to come back to this paragraph, but I want to start off with this notion and start off by saying that part of what seems to be the elemental feature of this night of Yetziat Mitzrayim is the notion of speed, of Hippazon, of something very fast. In fact, we might even say that the first fast food is matzah. Matzah is the food which is baked fast. If I ask anybody, what do you know about matzah? And they will tell me it has to be baked in under 18 minutes. Everybody knows matzah is the food that has to be baked fast. And therefore, one of the central features of the evening seems to be this notion of speed. Now, I want to come back to this question of speed, but let's first ask a very important question. If you look at source number 2, you will see the idea that even before Bnei Yisrael came out of Egypt, they were already told that they were going to eat the matzah. Because if you look in source number 2, Shemot Perek Yud Bet, it says, "V'achlu et habasar balayla hazeh, sli eish umatzot al merurim yochluhu." They were told that when they eat the Korban Pesach, they would have to eat it with unleavened bread, with that matzah which is baked so quickly. And if you look at the source underneath, more than that, they were told they would have to eat in a hurry. V'kacha tochlu oto, here's how you have to eat it. Motnechem chagurim, na'alechem baraglechem, umakelchem biedchem. Eat it with your loins girded, with your shoes on your feet, with your stick in your hand. V'chaltem oto b'chipazon pesachul Hashem. What I guess I'm trying to point to is the notion that there seems to be something about Yetziat Mitzrayim which connects in with the idea of speed. It's not just that incidentally we came out of Egypt before our bread had time to rise, but even before they left, on the night before they left, they ate particularly matzot. They ate the meat tzli eish. They ate it. It was barbecued, and the whole idea of the barbecue is the idea of eating it b'chipazon, eat it quickly. And my question, I guess, is why did everything have to be in such a hurry? Why did everything have to be so rushed? Is there something about Yetziat Mitzrayim which particularly lends itself to the notion of speed? What exactly is it about Yetziat Mitzrayim that makes it all so quick? Matzah, it didn't have time to rise. Matzah is Yetziat Mitzrayim takes less than 18 minutes, really, to move 600,000 people, less than 18 minutes. And why did they have to eat on that night? B'chipazon, in our own Seder, we're meant to eat leaning. We're meant to eat beheseva. We're meant to eat leaning. We're meant to be kibnei chorin. We're meant to take our time. It's a meal which takes place a whole evening, all night. We don't eat b'chipazon. But when they came out of Egypt, they ate b'chipazon. So what is this key element of speed, of doing it so fast, of what we call hippazon, the notion of hurrying? Let's look at the commentaries and see what they say. The first is going to be the Ibn Ezra, which you can see here in source number 3, Ibn Ezra. And let's take a look here. He says, "V'tam b'chipazon," the reason why you have to hurry, shelo yitakvu. They didn't want them to delay. What was the problem? When the midnight hour strikes 12, the mashchit, this destroyer, is going to be present in the community. It's going to be there lurking in the streets like a coronavirus, right? In the streets, it will kill indiscriminately. The only way you can protect yourself is by eating the Korban Pesach. And therefore, what do you want to do? You want to have eaten it before midnight. And that's why they say, we'll talk about this in a minute. These are Jewish families, right? Everything always starts late, right? Syrian time, Jewish time, it's always late, okay? Don't be late. Again, I'll read the Ibn Ezra. He says, the tam b'chipazon, the reason for the hurrying is shelo yitakvu, they shouldn't get stuck in. And they have to eat the Korban Pesach before the moment in which the destroyer will come. The assumption being it's not enough just to put the blood on the doorposts, but also that they have to eat the Korban Pesach. That's why they had to barbecue it. They had to make it not broiled, or they had to make it actually barbecued, because it's the fastest way to cook. It has to be eaten roasted. It has to be eaten only till midnight. The idea is that we have to hurry before the destroyer comes, before the midnight hour comes. That might be, but I'd like to maybe suggest a different approach. And let's take a look very quickly at Rashi, where Rashi adds in something else. And he adds in a phrase, what does Hippazon mean according to Rashi? This, by the way, should be in your source number 4. Hippazon, what does he say? Lashon behala umehirut. It is a language not only of speed, but of behala, of panic. As it says, David nechpaz lechet, or asher chlichu aram b'chovzam. I'll say more than that. Pesach Lashem Rashi, HaKorban Karui Pesach al Shem HaDilug VaHapsicha, שהקדוש ברוך הוא היה מדלג בתי ישראל מבין בתי מצרים וקופץ ממצרים למצרים. Why is our festival, why is the holiday we're going to celebrate called Pesach? Pesach means to leapfrog, to jump over. And as Dr. Aviva Zorenberg has explained very eloquently, you can't skip slowly. You cannot jump slowly. The only way to leapfrog, the only way to skip, the only way to jump is to get your body moving. There is something about speed. There is something about speed and panic on this night. It might be that we have to get there before the midnight hour, but I think it's something even more than that. And in order to explain this, we're going to turn to page 2 of our source sheets and Rav Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin. And here I think we're going to start getting into the insights that we need to find. Source number 5. Rav Tzadok HaKohen Lublin wrote a book called, he was a scholar from Lublin in Poland, and he wrote a book called Tzidkat HaTzadik. And let's read his first passage. Source number 5, top of page 2. Reshit knisat Adam la'avodat Hashem tzarich liot b'chipazon. The beginning of the entry of a person to God's service needs to be fast, needs to be quick. Kamo shematzinu b'Pesach Mitzrayim, following the model of Pesach in Egypt. Shaya ne'echal b'chipazon, v'lo b'Pesach Dorot. In other words, in all subsequent years, we take our time over our meal, but in Egypt, it had to be quick. Why? Why was the first Pesach ever needed to be so hurried, and every other year had to be relaxed? Answer, because at the beginning of things, you need to disassociate yourself. You need to disentangle yourself from worldly desires. You need to seize the moment, carpe diem, seize the day when you feel the initiative, and to lachboz from Hippazon, to move fast with that moment, latzeit mehem, ula yuchal, and then you'll go gently. What's he saying? He's saying that sometimes it's very difficult to get going on a new project. Whenever we need to start something new, let's say if you've ever decided you wanted to exercise, so it's not an easy thing to do. What do you have to do? You have to run with the moment, and you have to see if you can seize that sense of enthusiasm and use that in order to springboard yourself to a moment of action. What's the idea of Hippazon? It's taking that opportunity and jumping on the bandwagon. Once you're already in a role and you're already exercising, you're going running 3 times a week, then you can take it relaxed. But at the beginning of a project, why? Because we all have an inertia. We all have the worldly desire. What's the phrase here? The ties of worldly desire with which a person is entangled. Now, why would this apply to Egypt? I think it's very simple. You know, maybe I'll give you an example of my own to share. My family came to England, where I grew up, from Germany. And they came to England from Germany in February 1939. My grandfather was unemployed in Frankfurt, Germany. They'd already experienced Kristallnacht in Nazi Germany. In fact, my great-grandfather had already been sent to Dachau, and they'd got him out of there. And at the end of 1938, my grandfather came to England to see if he could find a job. There was a depression in England as well, and he couldn't find a job, and he sent a telegram home, back to Frankfurt, back to Germany, to Nazi Germany, in February 1939, and said, "I'm coming home." The family actually sent him a telegram back and said, "We actually got exit visas, meet us in Switzerland," and so they did, and that's why I'm here today. But what does that mean? That means that once somewhere's home, even if the Nazis are in charge, it's still home. It's always home. And it is very difficult to pull yourself out of home. And sometimes there's a small window of opportunity when we can leave. We can leave now. We got exit visas now. Now get out. If you don't get out, you'll never get out. And indeed, the rest of my family in Germany were killed in the Holocaust and didn't survive the war. For that initiative of the family, my grandfather said, "I'm coming home." My grandmother said, "We're out of here." See, carpe diem, seize the day. That's the Hippazon. The Hippazon was, who knows whether in 2 days, Paro's going to say, "What did I do? Why did I let the Jews go?" Hippazon is, now they let you go, leave, get out, because it's so easy to want to stay. Because after all, even if they've enslaved you, Egypt is home. And therefore, I come back to the Rabbi Tzadok is saying this about everything. He's saying, if you want to start doing a mitzvah, just push yourself to do it. Seize the moment, seize the day. That's what you should be doing. But what Rav Tzadok is saying is that the beginning of any Avodat Hashem, and we might even say the exodus from Egypt, you need to be b'chipazon. You need to seize the moment of opportunity and run with it. And that's what it's all about. So I started off by saying there seems to be a lot of things to do with speed in Yetziat Mitzrayim. And what might this be teaching us? And the answer of what it might be teaching us is that we needed to understand in Egypt, we had a small window of opportunity to leave, grab the moment and run. Obviously, after a few days, what happened? The Mitzrim turned around and said, "Why do we let the Jews go?" And they came running after us. So we see that this was well understood, that we had to seize that moment and leave. And it's true for any good thing that we want to do. You get an idea to invite people for Shabbat, invite them, of course, not in today's world. You decide you want to do a particular mitzvah, do it, because you never know when you will lose the opportunity. That's going to be idea number 1 of Hippazon, or maybe it's idea 2. The first idea was the Ibn Ezra, we've got to do it by midnight. But the second idea is this is a model of how we initiate things. But let's deal with idea number 3. And here I want to go back to the verses. Let's take a look at source number 6, which tells us the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. And I want to try and make a little bit more accurate this idea of the bread not rising. We say that we eat matzah because the bread didn't have time to rise. Why didn't the bread have time to rise? I mean, after all, how long does it take for dough to become chametz? 18 minutes? There weren't 18 minutes on our way out? What exactly is this idea that the bread did not have time to rise? So, if you don't mind, read with me the story from Shemot Perek Yud Bet. Here we go, it's in source number 6. Moshe tells the people that you're going to take some hyssop, you're going to put the blood all over the door. And it says here in verse 22, Va'atem lo teitzu ish mipetach beito ad boker. Va'avar Hashem lingofet Mitzrayim. Nobody should leave their house till morning. Everybody is in quarantine. Everybody is stuck in their home. Nobody leaves till the morning. Okay. So if you are the Israelites in Egypt, if you are the Jews, then what are you expecting? When are you expecting to leave? Let's go back to that phrase. None of you shall go outside the door of his house until morning. So what do you assume? You're going to leave at 6 in the morning, at 7 in the morning, at some time during the day. That's when you're going to leave. Okay, fantastic. So that's what we have. Okay, so now what are we going to expect? Let's see what happens next. Verse 29. It was at midnight, and God killed all the firstborn of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on the throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the cattle. And Pharaoh rose at the night because there was a loud cry in Egypt, for there was no house where there was not someone dead. So what's the time now? In other words, midnight, the firstborn die. What time did they discover it? 12:15, 12:30, 12:40? Okay. Verse 30. Pharaoh arose in the night with all his courtiers and all Egyptians, because there was a loud cry in Egypt. And he summoned Moshe and Aaron in the night and he says to them, Kumu tz'u mitoch ami, gam atem gam bnei Israel. It's time to leave. L'chu ivdu et Hashem kedaberchem. So Pharaoh has to wake up. He has to absorb that all of Egypt are dead. All the firstborns in Egypt are dead. And then what? Okay. He has to summon Moshe and Aaron and tell them to leave. What time is it? 1 in the morning, 1:30, 2 in the morning. Verse 33. The Egyptians urged the people on, impatient to have them leave the country, for they said, we're all dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading bowls wrapped in their cloaks about their shoulders. Let me try and explain why the bread didn't rise. Every good Jewish housewife was planning. She knew they were going on a big trip. She knew they were going on a journey, and they wanted to make fresh bread. I want to remind you that this year, the first year, there was no Isur of Chametz. All they had to do was to bring a Korban Pesach. But they were allowed to eat leaven that year. They were allowed to eat Chametz. So everybody had prepared a dough, and they were expecting to bake that dough at home in their ovens. The bread was rising through the night, and they thought they'd put it in the oven at 4 in the morning, at 5 in the morning, at 6 in the morning, and they'd leave with loaves of fresh bread. But instead, what happens? At 3 in the morning, they hear a knock on the door. Jews out, leave, go. And suddenly there is a huge confusion. Everybody has to leave, and there's no time to put the bread into the oven. Again, I want you to understand, how do you make bread, as in fat, big, regular leavened bread? It has to be in an oven. But what does it say they do? Look at verse 34. The people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading bowls wrapped on their cloaks above their shoulders. In other words, they hadn't had time to put the dough in the oven. That was the problem. It's not that dough didn't have time to rise, it's that they didn't have time to bake it, because they left before they could fire up their ovens. Look what it says next, verse 37. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot. And then it says in verse 39, in other words, what happens here that night when they get to their destination? And what is their destination? Their destination is the town of Sukkot. What do? They take their dough and they bake it on what? How do they bake it? They bake it on a taboon. They bake it in such a way that it will only be matzah. I don't know if you've ever seen the way you bake pizza on a taboon or on a saj, as it's called. But you take a piece of metal, you put a few twigs under it, you make it very, very hot, and you slap the dough on top of it, and it makes pita. What's the idea here? My point is they didn't make it into chametz. They didn't make it into matzah because the bread didn't have time to rise. It had plenty of time to rise. They didn't make it as bread because they didn't have an oven, because they baked it on the road. I guess my point here, and the point I'm trying to make, is that they left not just in a hurry. It's not they left hurriedly. I'd say more than that. They left prematurely. They expected to leave at 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, but they left at 4 in the morning. In other words, they were unprepared. What I'm saying is that Hippazon is not only leaving fast. Hippazon is leaving unprepared, when you're a little bit unready. And I want to take this into a wider concept here with the help of, on page 3, the Sfat Emet. So let's take a look at the Sfat Emet. And he says the following. One background to the Sfat Emet. If you look at the Sfat Emet, the Sfat Emet is going to start from the beginning of Beshalach. If you recall, in Beshalach, the people are running away. They're running away from the Egyptians, and they're told, Daber b'nei Israel v'yashuvu. Tell Bnei Israel that they should reverse their direction. They've been leaving Egypt and they should somehow turn about. Let them turn back, return back. And this is what he says. La'asher yatsu Bnei Israel b'chipazon mimitzrayim, v'haya shelo b'hadraga. Because the Israelites left Egypt in a non-gradual manner, b'chipazon, which means in a sudden leap, in a quantum leap. And anything which you do radically like that, ein zeh davar shel kayama, hutzruchu lashuv. They needed to go back. That's the first comment of the Sfat Emet. The Sfat Emet returned to this theme the next year, and this is what he says. Daber b'nei Israel v'yashuvu, yesh lomar hatama inyan, sheyitzia Mitzrayim ha'nes shelo b'hadraga. The Exodus was a miracle which happened suddenly, without any intermediate stages. V'hi l'sha'a. Anything you do which is such a radical change is unstable. It is only temporary. And says the Sfat Emet, God wanted this redemption to remain in Israel forever. And therefore, he says, Olakach tziva shiachzeru, Bnei Israel had to go back, v'ya'alu me'atzmutam. And they had to come up, they had to raise themselves up. Olachein vayitzaku, that's why they cried out. And says the Sfat Emet, but after Israel saw all the wonders that happened in Egypt, why were they fearful of the Egyptians? Because now they knew they had to overcome on their own basis. Let me try and explain what I think we're saying in this Sfat Emet. You know, Yetziat Mitzrayim is a very interesting phenomenon. Yetziat Mitzrayim, did Bnei Israel do anything? Did Bnei Israel have an active role? No. Throughout the 10 plagues, Israel just stood back and watched. Hityatzvu ru'u et Yeshuat Hashem. Israel just sort of let God do all the heavy lifting. And then, Hippazon, in a moment, they left Egypt. The question is, have Israel undergone a process? Have Am Yisrael undergone any sort of transformation? When anybody ever makes a major transformation in their life, sometimes they have to play catch up. You know what? Let me give you maybe an example from contemporary Israel. Many people have spoken about the difficulties with the Ethiopian community made Aliyah. And a lot of people said, you know, Israel made so many mistakes in the Aliyah from Iraq and from Morocco in the 1950s. They made so many mistakes with the Aliyah of the Russians in the 80s and the 90s. Why didn't they succeed more with the Ethiopians? I once spoke to a friend of mine who was the head of a Merkaz Klita, of an absorption center here in Israel. And I said to him, why couldn't we have done better with the Ethiopians? And he said to me something really very, very interesting. He said, you know, you can't win. I said, what do you mean? He said, look, when you take people from Africa and you bring them to Israel, when you take them from a third world country straight to a first world country, there's a huge divide. The parents are illiterate. They haven't got any skills from a modern society. Within 6 months, the children can read Hebrew and can speak Hebrew, and the parents can't. The parents can't cope. The children are taking them around the supermarket. When the parents then say to the children, don't go out at night, the children turn around to the parents and say, who are you to tell me what to do? I'm the one who's educated here. I'm the one who has the skills to manage here. You're reliant on me. They'll turn around to their father and say, you're a janitor in the local sports center, but I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a lawyer. In other words, there's a huge divide. Or simply put, you can't jump somebody from a third world country to a first world country just on an LL plane. Or it's easy to take the Jews out of Egypt, but are you going to make them any less? Are you going to help them undergo a transformation? What I'm saying is this, that it's true that Israel came out b'chipazon. They came out so fast, but they came out so fast, it created its own set of problems. The chipazon is a blessing, but after that, think about it. Bnei Israel came out so suddenly. What do they do all the time in the wilderness? We want to go back to Egypt. We want to go back to Egypt. We want to go back to Egypt. So what I'm saying is that Hippazon is a double-edged sword. It's the only way to get the Jews out. It's the only way to get Am Yisrael out of Egypt. But at the same time, when after Am Yisrael have come out, they still need to pay catch-up. Or, to say it a different way, the people who came out of Egypt didn't end up getting into Eretz Israel. And it was only their children were the ones who managed to come into the promised land. Because you can't take somebody out of Egypt in a moment. So what I'm trying to say is this. Let's review what we've said, and then we'll try and finish with one final idea. We asked, why is everything about Yetziat Mitzrayim so fast? Ibn Ezra said, well, we have to do it by midnight or else we'll get attacked by the destroyer in Egypt. And there is some truth in that. We took it to a more conceptual level with Rab Tzadok, where Rab Tzadok said, when you start any project, you need to carpe diem. You need to seize the day. Unless Am Yisrael had seized that window of opportunity, they never would have left. And therefore, Hippazon, when we eat the matzah and we eat this fast food, what we're saying is, you only get one chance to leave Egypt. Just like I said, my grandparents only got one chance to leave Germany. You won't get another chance. But the third idea I wanted to give is the idea that actually Hippazon represents a premature departure. Am Yisrael came out before they even expected it. Am Yisrael came out, they expected to leave at 6 in the morning. It's not that the bread didn't have time to rise. They didn't have time to bake it because they left their homes 2 hours early. And they ended up having to bake it on the road. And the only way to bake bread on the road, because you don't have an oven, is to bake it as pita, as matzah, instead of baking it as bread. And this notion of leaving prematurely has wider implications because it's a blessing to leave quickly, but there's all sorts of fallout further down the road. All the complaints in the wilderness, the fact that this generation did not reach Eretz Yisrael, is a reflection of the fact that they left, if you want, early. They left prematurely. They left before their time. They left Hippazon. And this is a whole different dimension of leaving. And now, if you will, let's just take a look at the bottom of page 3, the ideas of Rav Yoel bin Nun. And Rav Yoel bin Nun has a very, very beautiful idea here, which I want to share together with you. And this is what he says. He says, or maybe I'll explain, we don't need to necessarily read it. He says, the idea of matzah, imagine a dough. A dough begins flat, and then its aspiration, every dough would like to become big, fluffy, airy bread. He says, it's interesting, the symbol of Pesach, the symbol of Chag HaMatzot is the matzah, the flat bread. But once a year, we actually bring bread to the Beit HaMikdash. And when do we bring the Shtei HaLechem? We bring the Shtei HaLechem on Shavuot, 7 weeks later. He said, now imagine the entire Omer as a series of freeze frame photographs. The bread is rising, it's rising, it's rising, it's rising, it's rising, it's rising. We're going to reach our aim at Shavuot. What's the idea of Pesach? The idea of Pesach is, why do we only eat flatbread on Pesach? Because we're right at the beginning of the process. And this is what Rav Yoel bin Nun says. He says, leaven, chametz, represents the final goal to which the farmer aspires from the start of his work. Bread, which is chametz, expresses the end of the successful process, the longed-for result, the realization of that which he had visualized at the start and which he pursued until he achieved it. Matzah represents a station mid-process, before the end result is achieved. It represents the deficiency that is waiting for completion. Apparently, redemption is a prolonged, difficult process requiring patience and a great capacity for discomfort. The essence of the Chag HaMatzot then is a severe warning against the illusion of a complete redemption that happens in a single moment. What are we saying here? We're saying that redemption is a complicated, long, protracted process. And in a sense, that Chag HaMatzot represents the speed of redemption, but it also represents the notion that we are at the inception of a much longer process. Why don't we eat chametz on Pesach? We don't eat chametz on Pesach because we have to realize that we have a long, winding road towards redemption, towards Har Sinai, and later on towards Eretz Yisrael. This is not going to be redemption in a single shot, redemption in a single moment. So when we eat the matzah, we realize it represents the miracle of speed we never would have got out. But it also represents an unbaked or a half-baked redemption. It means that after Pesach, the day after the Leil HaSeder, we start counting the Omer. We say, this is only the first day, then there's a second day, and a third day, and a fourth day, and a fifth day, till we get to 49. In other words, we understand that we're celebrating the beginning, but there's still a much longer way to go. So these have been a few musings about the notion of speed, both a blessing and a curse. Speed is the central symbol of the matzah. It represents the opportunity of leaving, but it also represents the prematureness of it all, and the notion that Yetziat Mitzrayim is just the beginning of a process, the beginning of a long journey forward into Jewish history. On that note, I'll say stay safe, and you should have a joyous Chag. Stay, as it said with Yetziat Mitzrayim, Ish al yetzei mipetach beito. Nobody should leave their homes, and you should have a Chag kasher v'sameach. Thank you very much for participating, and look forward to meeting you again on many other learning occasions.